Hey folks, Kevin here. Well, it's May 15th, 2019. I'm outside and today we're going to do a little bit of an update on our garden plots. This is real early in the season. We haven't got hardly any of the plants in the ground yet. We don't put our plants into the ground until Memorial Day weekend. We can do some direct seeding if the weather permits and the beds are prepped ahead of time, and that's one of the topics that I wanted to talk about today. So one of the techniques that we employ here on our farming system, our homestead here, is we use permanent raised beds. Has been described by Elliott Coleman and Jean-Martin Fortier. Our beds are actually quite high off the ground because when we do have the rains like we've had recently, and we've had lots of rain recently. Actually, we're in Oswego, New York, and along the shoreline of Lake Ontario, there's a state of emergency because of the lake water levels are coming up and doing damage to those properties on the shoreline. And these weather events where we have more flooding have becoming more and more common in recent years. And that's one of the things that we've noticed over the years is that we really need to, in our specific site here, we need to have pretty high permanent raised beds. And so you'll notice when as you're looking at our permanent raised beds that they are pretty tall. They're several inches above the path level, so that when we get these multiple days of saturation in the spring and late fall, we're not actually soaking those roots and letting them get too wet. This is context specific. This is our location here. And we don't get the plants usually in the ground until Memorial Weekend because we have those late frosts after our last frost date. This is something that's been going on as well. I will be doing an update on the food forest soon, but today I just wanted to give you a little bit of a heads up on our garden layout before we actually start getting the plants in the ground. Now behind me here is the western garden plot where we've grown many annuals over the years, and we've had some potted perennial plants around the perimeter that we've overwintered and all. And this year I elected to put many perennial plants. So we're starting lots of blueberry plants inside of this garden plot. We've got some currants that are started in there, red, pink, and white currants that are black currants that are all started in there. We have hosta berries that are started in there as well. These are all hardwood cuttings, and we have some previous hardwood cuttings that have already have roots, and we're just getting a little bit larger in size until we can get those out into other locations in our food forest and in our U-pick gardens eventually. So those are some of the plants, and I've made previous videos about it. There will be some drone footage. Last week we actually had a day that the winds weren't too high and it wasn't completely overcast and rainy. So I got the Karma GoPro out and flew over these garden plots. So I believe the first garden bed that we're going to go through in the drone shots is this bed right here, which is our westernmost garden plot. And around the outside of this kennel panel here, we also have gooseberries. We have some chamomile, some carrots in there, some onions and chives all around in there. And we're doing some stooling or mounding, a type of hardwood propagation method to get more plants out of some more mature plants as well. So that's what's going on the outside of here. And on the inside, we're trying to get many of those perennial plants up and running. Now recently, a few videos ago, I showed that we had picked up from Tractor Supply some little red onion bulbs that we put into 72 cell trays. Well, they did fabulously inside the work area, and they're a very cold tolerant crop. And they had outgrown their cell size in those 72 cell cells. And so I got them out and got them in here now. Of course, they look rough and tough when it's challenging when you put them first in the ground, because you don't want to put them in too deep in the soil. You just want to have basically the roots in the soil. And of course, with all the rain that we've had every day recently, day and night, It's eroded some of the soil, but I'm pretty confident that probably 90% of those onions, which we've planted in between the rows of the blueberry plants. So we have 2 rows of blueberry plants in each permanent raised bed, and we place some red onions in the middle in between those as well. So that's what we've got going on in there that's changed over time. In the hoop back there, I did have some sweet potatoes that we had a frost guard over. It's a low hoop, and yesterday I posted a video showing that we were doing the cuttings of the sweet potato vines in order to propagate the slips from those. So let's go over to where the central garden plot is. So this is the western garden plot. The second one that you see in the drone footage is the central garden plot. Let's head over there. Okay, so I'm over here just south of the central garden plot, which is right behind me here over my right-hand shoulder, over the left side of your screen. And something I should mention, something I failed to get done before the high winds and the bad weather came this last fall. I was not able to get the beds tarped. Now, we left the weed mats on, and this is a technique that we used last year. Instead of using the weed mats where we burnt holes in them in the past, like we have done over in our eastern garden plot and in our western, we elected to have the whole site completely covered by weed mats, and in the center of the permanent raised beds, planting a single row of whatever crop it is, whether it's corn or tomatoes or peppers or whatever it is. And I think we're going to do the same thing this year, although we don't get as much food as a result because we're not going bio-intensive. You know, really planting them so thickly that we can maximize every square inch of the beds. But it does, in our particular situation, it works out so well because there's almost zero weeding and zero pests to deal with. So that's one of the benefits. One of the big pitfalls is these are all access roads all around here that I have to have open all winter long, and that big snow blower mounted on the front of the Mahindra tractor, well, that just picks up every time we get thaws and then freezes and thaws and freezes, picks up the soil as I'm snow blowing and distributes more weed seeds, little pieces of sod and chunks of weeds all over the surface of the weed mats. The other problem we had was during the fall and during the spring with the high wind storms that we get. Well, it just tore up all of the weed mats. So a little over a week ago, Thea and I were able to get the weed mats back down and get plenty of bags on them and tons of the garden staples or the weed mat staples in those to try and suppress any weed or suppress the emergence of the weeds and kill any weeds that had come up. I did prep these 2 areas here, these 2 final beds. That was good so that I could go ahead and I'll be able to flame weed these because the weed seeds have all started to germinate. We just had so much rain. Hopefully today I'll get to it, getting the flame weeder out, flame weed this area, and that bed will be ready. Now, under ideal circumstances with these permanent raised beds, the idea is to get the beds all prepped in the fall, get the weed mats associated, get the beds broad forked, get them tilthered if that's necessary as well, and then getting the tarp on top of the weed mats, getting the drip irrigation all drained out and all, and then getting that tarp on top of it. And that way, any of the materials that I blow on top of it with the snowblower is really easy. As I remove the tarp, all of the dirt and the seeds, all of that gets peeled off. The wind damage can happen to the upper surface tarp, but it doesn't happen to the weed mats. There isn't any more rapid aging effect of those weed mats. Let's go over to the eastern garden plot. Okay, I'm over here near the eastern garden plot, right at the edge where the access road that comes down separating the central garden bed and the eastern garden bed is located. We were able to get these beds prepped inside of the eastern garden plot. I'll have to do a little more work since we've had all these heavy rains since that point. We were able to get the Premier One fencing up. One of the things we do with the Premier One fencing is at every single post that there is for the Premier One fencing, we put a T-post, and then we put another T-post halfway in between the two areas. It really helps with the high winds that we have here. Our ground is so tough, really bony gravel ground, that it bends the stakes when we put them in. But when we drive the T-post down in, that makes a really good firm grasp, and we don't have to worry about the winds knocking these Premier One fences over. Closest to the house, or the hardy kiwi pergola over at the way up at the end there, there's the shortest bed. The beds get longer as you get closer where I'm standing, and the shortest bed we went ahead and transplanted some of the scallions that I didn't have enough space for in the fall, and I got them over into this bed, and the rest of the red onions as well are planted over in there. The rest of the beds still need to be planted yet, and a little more prep needs to be done. Behind me here is the hoop tunnel that we've had really good success growing crops, especially our beans and all in here. So Thea was able to get the Cherokee Trail of Tears and the Scarlet Red Runner beans planted on in this hoop, as well as the one over in the western garden plot as well. So that's done pretty well. Over here we've got the small wooden permanent raised bed there with, made out of 2x12s around the perimeters and all. That's going to have to be replaced eventually, but we'll be putting some probably the Zephyr squash in there. We'll have to see how things go. You'd see the rain gutter garden behind me there. That's got lots of clear plastic underneath the what were doors for sliding glass doors, the glass doors of sliding glass doors, and that's where we have our rain gutter garden. And so my goal is to go ahead and solarize the soil there, because it's got tons of weed seeds in there. As I mentioned before, when these beds aren't covered up, the weed seeds blow in, especially with these high winds we have, and then all the disruption I do with the snowblower. Around the outside here, I haven't gotten to the lavender to take care of those yet, but I did post a couple of videos on dealing with the irises. I had to do some earthworks to repair this drainage swale to make it run perfectly, but when I did do that, I left a little bit of a berm that retained moisture in those iris beds there, and so I rebuilt that this past fall, and they're doing great as well. Up on the other side, up along the up next to the rain gutter garden, going further north, which is away from me, is where the handicap gardens are. Those are the 4-inch high by 8-inch wide by 16-inch long rumble wall blocks, the handicap gardens that are there. And that's where we have our strawberry beds, strawberry plants planted now. They're all looking pretty good so far. I'll give updates on those as we get to June and all. And on the other side of it, I've got the other hoop system there. I'm not sure how I'm going to deal with that yet. We'll see. I've got some thoughts about that, but I'll share those thoughts as I get to those points. So I think I've covered the majority of the garden beds. You'll be able to see in the GoPro Karma drone footage going overhead the layout of the area and all. So when we're talking about the western, the central, and the eastern garden plots, you'll get an idea of what we're talking about as far as how they're oriented here on the property. The layout of these garden plots are not perfect. Certainly I would like to have rectangular or square garden plots so that each of the beds are the same length, so we don't have to worry about different length drip tape or weed mats, those sorts of things. So if I were to design this from scratch, I wouldn't be putting an access road going right down in between these garden plots. It's just not a great design. But it's working pretty well for us thus far. So I think that's about it. I just wanted to share, geez, around here, if we can use tarps to help protect the beds, that'd be great. Someday we'll have, certainly we'll have cover crops in all of our beds. That's one of my big goals for the future. That's going to be a couple years away because I've got other plans to get other projects done around here as well. So I hope this video was somewhat informative to give you a ground base, a foundation for where we're going this season. And many best wishes to everyone out there with your gardens this season. I'm super excited about growing food as usual. So if you have any comments or questions, please leave them below. And if you found this video of value, please give us a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and by all means, folks, have a great day. Bye-bye now.